In a previous video, I talked about false rape allegations, and in that video, I specifically mentioned the fact that the vast minority of rape allegations, at most 8%, but as little as 2%, probably closer to 2%, of those allegations turn out to be false. And I mentioned that this is just one piece of evidence that you should consider when attempting to determine whether a rape accusation is real or false. This fact caused a lot of otherwise reasonable people to completely flip out. And I found it really interesting and a bit odd because these people are, by and large, skeptics, and skeptics often talk about the problem of probabilities. For instance, one phrase that's thrown around quite often in the skeptic community is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And all of this basically means is that something with a very, very low probability of happening requires a very, very high degree of evidence in order to start to convince you that it may be true. And this is something that most skeptics understand as a truism when it comes to things like whether or not John Edward can really talk to the dead. We know that there is a very, very small chance of that being so. And so in order for John Edward to prove that he is one of the few, maybe the only person who can talk to the dead, he would need to provide an overwhelming amount of evidence in order to get past that problem of probability. But once you switch the topic from psychic abilities to rape allegations, many skeptics suddenly give up on their idea that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And instead, they suddenly embrace this idea that all claims are equally ordinary, regardless of their probability of actually having happened. Another common skeptic phrase is, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. This was started most likely by a doctor by the name of Theodore Woodward at the University of Maryland, and he was conveying to his students that they should bias their thinking toward diseases that are more common, because not all diseases have an equal probability of being the disease that your patient has. The rare disease should still be in the back of your mind as a possibility, but you should start with the assumption that it is most likely going to be the common disease. Skeptics use the zebra metaphor quite often, for instance, in a ghost investigation. If someone is claiming to hear knocking late at night, you should start off by knowing the probability of whether it is their dead grandfather or whether it could be an old furnace. You know that the furnace is much more likely, so you start by investigating that first. And only after you rule that out do you move on to other, less probable things, which, okay, could eventually include the ghost of their granddad knocking around the house. But again, when we change the topic from ghosts to rape, a lot of skeptics suddenly decide that those hoofbeats are equally likely to be either zebras or horses, and that rash could either be poison ivy or lupus, equal probabilities of happening. So why is this? I can think of a few reasons. If you are raised in a society that sees ghosts as being absolutely as probable as an old furnace, then you are likely to believe that the knocking in your house is coming from your dead grandfather rather than the furnace, because in your head, they have an equal likelihood of happening. Skeptics generally understand that this isn't so, that ghosts have a very low probability of existing compared to old furnaces. And if you're raised in a society that tells you that there's an equal probability that someone might be raped as there is that someone might be lying about rape, then you will move forward with the idea that these are two equal probabilities, even when you are faced with hard evidence that they are not. Now, just to be crystal clear for the pedants out there, no, I don't think that false rape accusations happen with the same frequency as a person talking to the dead or the dead walking around your house. No, I just think that in all of these cases, we always need to consider probabilities as one line of evidence. The 98 to 2 probability is an important one when it comes to false rape accusations. In other words, before I give up on the idea that it's a horse, I just want to see a couple stripes.